Mhm. I'll put my camera on. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the How to Apply Spring 2024 webinar. We will be recording today, so I ask if you could turn your video off, mute, or either turn your microphone off. If you have questions throughout the webinar, can you please put them in the chat? And at the end, we will do a question and answer period. First, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Dawn Scott. I am the Single Family Program Manager of the ASNH Homeownership side of the program. Today, we're going to go through what is ASNH. We're also going to talk about what's new and what's the same, application submissions, as well as scoring overview, the notification process. And like I said earlier, we will have a question and answer period at the end. First, I would like to introduce two of the program administrators that you will be working with once you get funded. Our associate director, her name is Chloe Rote. Some of you are familiar with her, but for those who are new, she is head of the entire affordable special needs housing program, the rental side, as well as the single family homeownership side. We have Sarah Foote, who is our program administrator. And then we have Joan Marshall. She is another program administrator on the homeownership side. Okay. So I wanted to get into updated competitive application used by the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development to award National Housing Trust Fund, Home Investment Partnerships, Virginia Housing Trust Fund, Housing Innovations in Energy Efficiency, and Permanent Supportive Housing funds to multifamily rental developments and single-family homeownership developments across the Commonwealth. But for the homeownership side, the funds that are currently available would be Home, Virginia Housing Trust Fund, and Highe, which is Housing Innovations and Energy Efficiency. We do 2 application cycles annually, one in the fall and one in the spring. Currently, our spring application is open. It's open until April 24th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. If you encounter any issues when you're trying to submit your application or trying to upload your attachments, you can contact the CAMS help desk at camshelp@dhcd.virginia.gov. The CAMS help desk is only available Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They are not available on the weekends, so just keep in mind Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. if you have any questions or issues with submitting your application or uploading your attachments. Next, I would like to talk about what's new for spring 2024. Some of the stuff is still new from the fall. It has not changed yet. We have reorganized and reduced a number of the narrative questions in the application. We have also combined a lot of the templates and have more examples and explanations and instructions for uploading your attachments. As far as the guidelines, we have reorganized them and updated certain questions specific to the homeownership program. And also we have changed how we do the post-award process. So we would discuss the post-award process later. Most of the things that's the same would be applicant and project eligibility. our funding sources, limits, restrictions, submission through CAMs, announcements and notifications, and then timelines for your contracts, which would be your program agreements. So with applicant eligibility, you have to be a nonprofit organization or a or a for-profit developer. Okay. You can be a DHCD certified CHDO. You must be the owner, which means, you will hold title to the project, and the developer, which will be your contractual partner of the project. If your project is an LLC or a legal entity, you would not be eligible. Everyone must be registered in CAMS in order to apply for the funds for either spring or fall. And you also have to apply for a UEI number, which stands for Unique Entity Identifier Number. This is a 12-digit number that replaces the 9-digit DUNS number, and it will be unique to your agency. And in order to apply for that number, you can go to sam.gov and go get set up to get your unique number. So for project eligibility, project is a grouping of homes on an application. You do have to have specific addresses and parcels, and the scopes of work is required. And you can only apply for one project per application. So if you apply for two different sources with different addresses and units, then you will need to submit two different applications. Okay. The project can be new construction, substantial renovations, adaptive reuse. We do allow for scattered sites as long as the sites are within the same jurisdiction. We do recommend that you have a pre-application call if your project is going to contain scattered sites. Okay. There is a minimum of 5 units that you would have to apply for. You can't apply for less than 5. It has to be a minimum of 5 units that will target low-to-income individuals or households that are below 80%. There is a minimum investment of $15,000 per unit. If you're doing substantial renovations, then 3 systems in the home must be renovated or rehabbed. Okay. There is a maximum request for all units of 700,000, whether it's home or Virginia Housing Trust Fund. That is the max request you can ask for. Some individuals have come in and also requested Highe funding, and the max for that is 10% of your total development cost, or 2 million, whichever is lesser. Okay. Now, if you were awarded a previous ASNH award of either home or Virginia Housing Trust Fund, and you come in to apply for Highe, if you were approved and awarded for home or Virginia Housing Trust Fund, then you would automatically be awarded for Highe. You cannot apply for Highe separately, only after you have been awarded a major source fund of either home or Virginia Housing Trust Fund. I want to talk about the funding sources that are currently available. In the beginning of 2024, funds were allocated at a larger amount than what we currently have now. What we're showing now for home partnership is 2.85 million is what we have remaining. In the beginning, we were allocated 8,624,000. For Virginia Housing Trust Fund, we were allocated 60 million. As you can see now, we're down to 4 million. And for Highe, we were allocated 95 million, and now we're down to 36 million. DHCD reserves the right to award different amounts as allocations are subject to change, and unawarded funds will be rolled over to future rounds as allowed by source. Highe funds are available through 3 application cycles, including those in the ASNH Highe supplemental funding round. So each project earning a competitive source award, whether it's Home, National Housing Trust Fund, or Virginia Housing Trust Fund, which is designed to meet the Highe minimum performance requirements, is eligible for an award of up to $2 million or 10% of its total construction costs, as calculated in the ASNH application workbook underwriting tab. Okay. And with the 2 million or the 10% total development cost, whichever is less, is the cap that you will receive for Highe. We do have some compliance and affordability requirements as it relates to each DHCD investment per unit. Again, the home buyer has to be under 80% of the area median income. The DHCD investment per unit has an affordability period attached to each unit. So if the DHCD investment is between 15,000 to 40,000, there will be a 10-year affordability period. Okay. Anything over 40,000, it will be a 15-year affordability period. And this relates to homebuyer projects that are receiving Home and Virginia Housing Trust Fund. And then there could be other additional HUD-based requirements that can apply. Also with this, the all home buyers must live in their home as their principal primary residence during the affordability period, which means if they have a 15-year affordability period, the homeowner must remain in the home. They can rent, sell, lease, or anything like that during the affordability period. With federal funds before, especially with home, you must have a 25% match secured at time of application. If you have questions on entitlement or consortium areas, you can find them in our program guidelines under Appendix A. Okay. For CHDO status, we do have a scoring preference. So to be eligible for the CHDO scoring preference, which is an additional 5 points, you must have an active CHDO certification in CAMS at the time of application. There is a rolling application that is open in CAMS. So if you haven't gotten certified and you want to get certified as a CHDO, I would advise you to go ahead into CAMS and complete that CHDO application. The goal of the home environmental review is to ensure that environmental concerns are identified, addressed, and that the environmental information is available to public officials and citizens before decisions are made and before actions are taken. So keep in mind, if you have a project and you're going to apply for home funds, which are federal funds, you will have to make sure there is a phase 1 done, as well as a part 58 done for environmental review. DHCD will require that an environmental review is completed. We will do a public notice for federal funds. No development activity, including acquisition of the property, can occur prior to the completion of this review. Okay, this review is also going to include publication of a notice of findings, which is a FONSI, and the request for release, and the request for release of funds from HUD. Projects proceeding with development or choice limited activities prior to the completion of this review may be ineligible for home funds. Some examples of choice limited activities would be acquisition, rehabilitation, construction, as well as contracting for or committing to any of these actions prior to the completion of the environmental review. Now, if you have HUD site approval prior to these activities, we will need to see that with your application. And we'll also need to see the authority to use grant funds letter from HUD for the locality that completed your Part 58. But if not, and you have started doing some of these choice limiting activities, then this would deem your project ineligible for home funding because DHCD has not completed their review of that. Okay. So some of the documentation that must be submitted with your application, if you have prior HUD approval, would be the final Part 58 that is signed by the locality, and you must include your supporting documentation with that Part 58, your affidavit confirming publication dates of your FONSI and your request for release of funds, as well as your authority to use grant funds letter from HUD. Okay. And then through our environmental review and completion, DHCD will obtain authority to use grant funds from HUD if we are going to adopt your Part 58. Community housing development organizations. Generally, CHDOs must meet organizational, mission, financial management, and capacity requirements, which may include but are not limited to the following: certified nonprofit status, being a community-based organization, low income representation in board composition. Primary mission is the provision of affordable housing, demonstrated capacity to develop affordable housing, conformance to accounting procedures, and financial soundness. Again, if you have CHDO status and you've been certified by DHCD, you will get a scoring preference, okay, of 5 points. Now, I know some organizations have been certified through their locality as a CHDO. If that's the case, you will not receive scoring preference. You would have to be certified through DHCD in order to receive that scoring preference. Charter requirements must be continually met during the project, and you are required to do an annual recertification in CAMS. And I would advise, if you're gonna, be applying, that you go ahead and get that annual recertification done before you put in your application. There are some additional regulations. The ASNH program must follow these for any project, okay? DHCD does not follow Davis-Bacon regulations because only less than 12 units are allowed for home federal funds for single-family development. So if you have any further questions on the number of units or Davis-Bacon, you can access the program guidelines as it relates to those additional standards. Okay. Now I would like to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Dawn. Hold on, hang on one second, y'all. Are we gonna try again? Okay, perfect. Can everybody hear me? Hopefully. Um, as Dawn said before and introduced us so kindly, I am Sarah. I'm one of your program administrators, and I'm gonna take it from here. Oh, thank you. Got a thumbs up. Thumbs up right back at you, Carmen. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about the application submission and what that entails. So our application is currently live on CAMS. And it is live and it will close on April 24th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. That is 3 weeks and 1 day from today. So if you are thinking about applying and you haven't actually gotten started on the application, I would encourage you do so pretty much as soon as you can. That will give you enough time to reach out to CAM's help if anything is looking a little froggy in the application upload section, and it will also allow for you to get your CHDO certification completed in CAMS if that's something that you are eligible for and interested in doing. As far as the application goes, you're going to definitely want to read the instructions pretty closely. It does include all of the required materials, and we can talk a little bit more about that in just the slide right after this one. The way that it's scored, which we're going to talk about a little bit as well, is it's a panel review. And that means there's several of us reading each of the applications, and we do a review for eligibility, completeness, and quality of the project in terms of how it is competitive compared to the other applications that are submitted for that round. Then we score and rank them, and you have to achieve a minimum of 60 points to be funded. Now, I do want to caution you that a project scoring 60 points may be eligible, but they may not actually be awarded funding. As you saw before, our funding pools are considerably smaller this round than they were in the fall. So, it's probably going to be a bit tight to get that kind of the amount that you want or as many projects as you want funded if you're applying for more than one. So 60 just ensures eligibility. It's not a guarantee of an award. And I just wanted to be pretty clear about that right up front. Moving on into the application workbook. This is the template that we were talking about before. We've actually made it easier for you. It's just one document now rather than asking for a bunch of documents to be uploaded to CAMS. We've kind of hopefully done it in one fell swoop. You will find that template in CAMS as you're getting ready to apply. So it's not something that DHCD will need to send to you, or like you have to access on our website or anything like that. Everything's just in CAMS. This was new last fiscal year, and it combines the older document, the application packet, the timelines, homebuyer underwriting template, and the site and neighborhood standards review. So hopefully that'll help streamline things as you're getting ready to apply. To kind of dig a little deeper into how we score applications, we do score based on need, capacity, and feasibility. Those are our buckets. And the need part basically outlines how well have you articulated the need for funding for this particular project? What need is it meeting, or what solution is it providing for your region or for your particular neighborhood? There is no homebuyer penalty for not including permanent supportive housing. Some of you who have done rental projects before utilizing DHC funding may remember that there's a penalty if you don't include permanent supportive housing in your rental applications. Not so for home ownership applications. But there are some other kind of funky little tricky side notes that we wanted to highlight for you. For example, for home projects only, projects and entitlements or consortiums are going to receive 5 fewer points. And you must also have a committed local match in order to be eligible for funds. So you may lose some points or you may gain some points depending upon your CHDO status or whether you're in an entitlement or a consortium area. That's just to try to balance it out and make it more equitable, because we understand folks are not all applying from the same regions and don't have the same assets. So you might gain some points or lose some points depending on your consortium or entitlement status and whether or not your organization is a certified CHDO by DHCD. We also take feasibility of the project into account. How likely is it, this is all feasibility means, how likely is it that the project is going to be completed within the timeline requirements? Our funding sources, especially federal sources, do have HUD imposed requirements for executing a contractual obligation for funds, so a deferred loan agreement, and for project completion. So your project should be able to demonstrate that your construction or rehabilitation, whichever project you're pursuing funding for, uh, can begin within 6 months without a hitch. That means that the project already at the time of application has no remaining zoning or special use permit approvals pending and no additional public hearings or votes, that you have fully committed external sources of funding. You're really just kind of waiting on DHCD to come in and provide that gap funding or that top off, because that will get you that last extra mile to be able to complete the project. If you do have current projects that are experiencing delays, especially those that utilize DHCD funding already, you should be able to detail reasons for why those projects have gotten delayed, why they're a little bit off track, and indicate how this project that you're applying for, that timeline's going to be accurate. It's not going to be the same situation. How are you going to protect your project from delays and respond proactively to keep delays from impacting the project that you're applying for now? All of that goes into feasibility. We've also got to consider developer capacity. This is just basically the capacity to be able to successfully complete projects and deliver affordable housing. Plain and simple, we want y'all to build the houses. We want units made, on time, and we want the home buyers to be able to get into them and have their keys. So federal regulations, much like for feasibility, actually also require us to certify developer capacity, including for CHDOs, prior to the commitment of home funds. This would also be relevant for National Housing Trust Fund dollars, but that is not a funding source that the homeownership side of ASNH uses. So for us, we're just going to be focusing on home funds when it comes to our federal regs. We do have to evaluate developer capacity using the following measures: the developer's demonstrated experience developing similar projects, staff experience in housing development, which excludes consultants, contractors, or partners, although those are still taken into consideration, and your current financial soundness, including compliance with DHCD's own audit policy. If you look at your organization in CAMS and you see that you have an outstanding audit, I would recommend getting that taken care of before applying for funding for a new project or further funding for a continuing project. We want to make sure that everybody is financially sound and on the up and up before we award more dollars toward your organization. We also evaluate the capacity of applicants that are requesting only state sources of funding. So, for example, if you were going to apply for Virginia Housing Trust Fund dollars for this project in this application cycle, or Virginia Housing Trust Fund and Highe dollars, that would still be subject to us reviewing your developer capacity. We have to be able to see that there is a clear and well-detailed relationship between all the partners involved in the development, ownership, and property management of a project. And we have to understand that you have a demonstrated success with similar projects, including ongoing operations and long-term compliance. A final note for scoring, we've got Highe criteria specifically that if you are looking to secure Highe funds as part of your funding package, these are just things you're going to want to keep in mind. Like Dawn was saying before, projects that request Highe funds must first be scored and ranked and awarded a competitive ASNH source. So you've either already, for homeownership purposes, got to have Virginia Housing Trust Fund or home funds secured. You get those going, then you go ahead and apply for Highe on top. That'll be great. You also then must demonstrate that your designs are going to achieve the minimum performance requirements, which are in our program guidelines as well, which include green build certification and zero energy ready homes. And if you have any questions about any of these terms, those are also listed in our program guidelines, a little bit more of a breakdown for what each of these regulations is actually asking for. We also have to further break it out for new construction. We need a green building certification for each unit. And for substantial rehab, we need a green building certification with a HERS index instead of the ZER index. These are not easy acronyms to get stuck in one's mind. But like I said, all of these Highe criterion are going to be able to be found in our program guidelines in the the area that was previously called Appendix B. So if you want to do a deeper dive into what Highe regs look like, our guidelines are a good place to go next. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Joan, and she will get going talking about what happens once you have been awarded funding. Take it away, Joan.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. So once the application cycle closes on the 24th, the process goes over to the Office of the Governor, who makes the ASNH program funding award announcements public, and that's usually by a press release. So once that application closes, we cannot answer any questions about the timing or the contents of the announcements, and those inquiries will not be responded to. So after that public announcement, our staff will send an email to the project primary contact listed in CAMS containing the notification of funds or the denial of funding. That will be through email and only to the primary project contact. So please make sure that that information is up to date in CAMS. So after that initial letter is sent, you'll get another letter, the terms letter at item number 2. That'll be sent identifying more specific stipulations, and that needs to be signed by both us, DHCD, and the award recipient. You'll then need to return an executed deferred loan agreement, which will also be prepared by us. And you have about 12 months after the award notification to do that. So that will give you time to complete any environmental reviews that need to be done, or just anything else that you need to get done before that deferred loan agreement is signed, such as finalizing budget items. Then the deferred loan agreement typically expires after 24 months. And so, for example, this cycle ends April 25th. The agreement would be signed within a year, and then the construction would be complete within 2 years from that. That's not exact dates, that's just an example. So to access those awarded funds, once your deferred loan agreement is signed, you'll also have a deed of trust that needs to be signed and recorded, and then you can begin construction. Those construction reimbursements are paid out in 4 installments at 30, 60, 90, and then the final 10% completion. And for that final 10% completion, you'll need to have returned all of the closing documents from the unit sales to our staff. And when each unit is sold, that per unit investment is released from you, the developer, with that certificate of partial satisfaction, and then tied to the homeowner in a new second deed of trust, which they will sign at closing and we will prepare for you. Okay, that's all I have on the post-award process. Now I'll send it back to Dawn for the Q&A portion.
Okay, thank you, Joan and Sarah. Again, here are our program contacts in case you have any further questions after this session. All of the updated ASNH homeownership documents have been uploaded to the DHCD website, as well as the program guidelines. I'm going to leave the chat open for a few more minutes in case anyone has questions. If you have questions, If you want to put them in the chat, you can put them in the chat, or you can come off of mute and ask your question. Any questions?